Hi, happy last week of classes. Um, I'm laughing because I just filmed this. I was about to submit my video and I realized my microphone wasn't on, so you couldn't hear me at all talking. So, I'm filming it again, but it's okay. Let's just hop right into these questions. For the first one, what podcast did you choose and why? So I chose Taboo Tales, Love, Sex, and Disability. And I chose it just because I wanted to hear personal stories, specifically from people with disabilities, talking about how like they've navigated relationships with their disability and some of the challenges that they faced. And the podcast had three guest speakers. One was just a woman with a physical disability. I think it was called AMC. And then the other two people were a couple. Um, I think it was their names were Taylor and Paige. And Paige was she has cerebral palsy and Taylor is able-bodied. So they kind of just talked about their experience as a couple and then um Paige talked about specifically like her challenges that she's faced navigating relationships. But as far as like a summary, it basically again just kind of talks about topics of love, dating, intimacy, um, in regards to like disability. Um, the first person that spoke was Zarifa, and again she talked about how she like the different challenges that she's faced and how she's chosen to navigate relationships with her disability. She talked about like specifically her using dating apps and how she right away discloses her disability within like the first conversation just because she feels it's very important to like tell people because at the end of the day like it's her identity and she's very proud of who she is and she doesn't want to like lead people on um, in case they're not comfortable dating someone with a disability. But she also talks about her social media page and um, how she uses her flat platform to bring more representation to disability and intimacy. She posts like pictures of herself in lingerie, um, which is something that's like underrepresented um like in society and like on social media. So she's very proud of that. And I think the most memorable thing that she talked about for me was a conversation that she had had with her mom about wanting kids. Um, and her mom had kind of just like questioned her and was like, not so much question, just told her like flat out, like, why would you have kids like with your disability? Like you can't like how would you be a mother? And that really hurt Zarifa because like you would think that like if anyone would support that decision, it would be her own family. Um, and it was especially hard after like she had talked to her doctor and her doctor had told her that she most definitely could have kids. So it was just hard that like even though professionals were telling her that she could have kids, like it was still hard to hear from her own family that like she shouldn't because of her disability. So overall, she kind of just talked about the some of the challenges that she's faced and her accomplishments in the disability community. And then Paige and Taylor, the couple, Paige specifically talked about her first like initial experiences dating. She had went on a dating show. I don't remember if it was specifically around people with disabilities, but she talked about like her first experience going on a date on a dating show, which is crazy to me. And she talked about how like even though that date didn't really go anywhere, it gave her a lot of confidence to go back out and keep trying. And that's when she started going on like the dating apps. But unlike Zarifa, she chose to hide her disability for a long time just because she was unsure of whether or not people would judge her. So like in photos, she would hide her wheelchair and she wouldn't mention her cerebral palsy at all. Um, and from the sounds of it, it sounds like her now partner Taylor, um, he was the first person that she introduced her disability or disclosed her disability to, which was very interesting. And as a couple, they kind of just talked about their experiences of being like a able-bodied and disabled couple, um, and how they've received judgment from people or different assumptions. Like one of their neighbors had assumed that Taylor was Paige's caretaker, or like someone thought that Taylor was the uncle, which is just crazy to me. Um, and they talked about how another time they went to like a cafe and it was obvious that a woman was like clearly judging them and was staring them down, which again is just crazy to me that people are that bold to be like doing that, um, and wasting their life doing that. Um, but that was basically, what they talked about. And overall, the episode or the podcast was just about people's personal stories and personal experiences navigating relationships with a disability. All right. Sorry, I had to pause because I got very thirsty all of a sudden. So for number three, the first part of the question, have you ever thought about this topic before? Yeah, so I mean, I've definitely taken disability courses in the past that have touched on um, like disability and intimacy in relationships. So I've gotten like a little bit understanding of the topic before. Um, I also love the show Love on the Spectrum that's on Netflix. I've only seen the US version, but I've seen all the seasons and I love it so much. And that really, I feel like, was my first real introduction into the topic just because you get to hear those personal stories and kind of see people like having their first experiences going on dates. In case I feel like you're aware of the show, but just in case, um, all the contestants or majority of the contestants either have autism or like Down syndrome, and they kind of just talk about, you know, how like as a kid they've always wanted to be in a relationship and have that fairy tale, you know, ending, but because of their disability and the challenges that they face with like even getting friendships, um that like relationships didn't even seem like a possibility. Um so I feel like the show itself really goes against those stereotypes that people with disabilities can't be in relationships or they can't find love. But that was definitely like my first big introduction into the topic. For the next part of the question, have you ever assumed someone was a caregiver when perhaps they were a partner? Uh, no. I don't think I've ever even been put in that position. Like, I've never seen a caregiver and like the person with the disability like together. Like, I don't think I've ever been in like a position to even assume something like that. And again, like with the podcast, Paige and Taylor talk about those experiences. And again, that's just so odd to me. Like, I understand like questioning, like at the end of the day, like I feel like we always like question things, but if you're that like unsure, just ask. Like I to me, like even asking is like at the end of the day, it's not your business. But if you're that like unsure, like ask, don't assume. And again, that's just like a stereotype that like the person with the disability like can't have a relationship and that that person must be a caretaker or a family member. But no, I've definitely never assumed that before. And then for the last part, do you think do you think you had or have any biases related to this topic? Um, no, I don't think so. I will say, like, again, with what Zarifa had mentioned in the podcast, how with that misrepresent or underrepresentation of disability and intimacy, like on social media and in I don't know what, like public media, like ads and stuff, like modeling, you definitely don't see like people with physical disabilities like being models for lingerie or undergarment stuff like that. And that was definitely something I didn't think about before hearing her say that. But like when she had said that, I was like, oh yeah, like she's definitely right about that. Like I've never gone into like Target and seen models, like people with physical disabilities model for like underwear and stuff. But that should exist. Like there's no reason that it shouldn't. It's just like when you don't see it, you don't think about those things, especially if you are able bodied, you're seeing yourself and you don't automatically assume like, why isn't there a physical disability person modeling, you know? So that is, I wouldn't say I have any biases, but there are things that I've probably, again, like this topic, like that I've never thought about before. Um, but yeah. And then for the last question, what is something you learned about disability cultures as it relates to relationships, intimacy, and or sexuality? Again, I think I just learned a lot about the different stereotypes and challenges. Um, I didn't really think about how people have this, like, again, assumption that people with physical disability or people with disabilities can only date other people with disabilities. Like I don't know why people think that. Like it like at the end of the day we all have preferences, and like just because a person with a disability like has a disability doesn't mean that they want to date someone else with a disability. Like just like we have preferences on like hair color or I don't know, body types. Just like we we all have preferences, and we shouldn't like people with disabilities shouldn't automatically be put into this bubble that they can only date each other. Um and then they also talked about how even though people put those bubbles in, people with disabilities that date each other receive more judgment than um, couples that where the one person is has a disability and the other person is able-bodied. So I thought that was very interesting too, because it's like if that's what you're automatically assuming, but then you're also judging them for it. Like it's too complex. Like I don't understand why it's like it's like a triple stereotype, double stereotype. Um And then again, like learning about other stereotypes of like people with disabilities shouldn't have children because it's almost like it's seen as like a selfish thing. Like, why would you put your kid at risk of getting of getting this disability as well? And again, like it's not your business. Like obviously there is that risk, but like at the end of the day, like it's like none of your businesses and it's not your choice. Like if they're able to have a child, they can have a child. So um it was just crazy hearing some of these stereotypes and some of these experiences people with disabilities have had. It really opened up my eyes to like society and like some of these stereotypes that still exist. Like it's crazy that these stereotypes still exist today, with all of like the resources and information that's out there. But yeah, I think that's about it. I hope you have a great day. Bye.